Thank you so much for your time. My question is sort of going back to the topic of Israel and Palestine, and specifically focused on Resolution 242. And just to give a context to the audience, like what Resolution 242 is. So in 1967, the United Nations passed Resolution 242, and this legislation requested that Israelite armed forces retreated from the territories occupied during
Need to run Windows on your Mac? Parallels Desktop make
the recent conflict.
From territories occupied,
Yes,
not the territories.
Yes.
This is actually a real distinction.
Yeah. So in 1967, the United Nations passed Resolution 242, and this legislation requested that Israelite armed forces retreated from the territories occupied during the recent conflict.
From territories occupied,
yes,
not the territories.
Yes.
This is actually a real distinction in the law.
Yes,
it makes a big difference, actually.
Yeah, sorry. And it also stressed the importance of resolving the refugee issue justly, and also encouraged the end of the belligerency claims in states. However, the resolution did not explicitly state which territories Israel had to withdraw from because of the ambiguities in the language of the English version versus the French version. And this ambiguity kind of is being used as a resolution, like by the Israelites to justify its continued occupation of some territories. And
the Israelites, it's like ancient Hebrew language.
furthermore, although the resolution mentioned a just resolution for the refugee issue, it failed to clearly address the right of the Palestinian people to statehood. And from my understanding, that is the reason why a lot of the Arab nations sort of reject that resolution. So my question for you is, if you were in their shoe, if you're a Palestinian, aware that there's impreciseness within the resolution that will potentially put your people in disadvantage, how would you respond to that, and whether you will accept a partisan deal or will you reject it? And before you answer, I'm ready to be destroyed by Ben Shapiro.
So, I mean, the answer, if I were a Palestinian citizen, which fortunately I'm not, because it's horrible to live under the Palestinian Authority or Islamic Jihad or Hamas, but if I were, I hope that what I would be doing is pressing for a full-scale attempt at a peace deal that would involve a two-state solution. The biggest problem with the two-state solution right now is that one side wishes to exist and the other side wishes it not to, and that's a serious problem. So if that were to alleviate, there's been heavy movement for decades in Israel for ceding territory, which is why Yasser Arafat was in charge of areas of the West Bank, which is why the Gaza Strip, which was completely ceded to the Palestinians in 2005. Israel removed 8,000 Jews from the Gaza Strip in 2005. They did not have internal military presence in the Gaza Strip, which is why they didn't actually have any intelligence as to what was going on October 7th. And so the obvious answer would be that if a Palestinian government were to arise that were trustworthy and credible in its pledges not to actually attack and use their new state as a base for attack, and that would require time and trust, and that would have to be built up over time, given the side wishes to exist and the other side wishes it not to, and that's a serious problem. So if that were to alleviate, there's been heavy movement for decades in Israel for ceding territory, which is why Yasser Arafat was in charge of areas of the West Bank, which is why the Gaza Strip, which was completely ceded to the Palestinians in 2005. Israel removed 8,000 Jews from the Gaza Strip in 2005. They did not have internal military presence in the Gaza Strip, which is why they didn't actually have any intelligence as to what was going on October 7th. And so the obvious answer would be that if a Palestinian government were to arise that were trustworthy and credible in its pledges not to actually attack and use their new state as a base for attack, and that would require time and trust, and that would have to be built up over time given the amount of distrust in the region, which would allow for presumably gradually increasing control of borders with, say, Jordan, right? If you're talking about the West Bank, it would also require land swaps. I mean, all these things have been discussed by Israel before. They were proposed in 2008 by Ehud Olmert. Mahmoud Abbas literally got up and walked away from the table without a counteroffer. So when it comes to the practicality of solution, that rests on whether the Palestinians are willing to have a government at any point that would actually make that peace deal. And it was interesting. I was at Oxford last night, the other university. I was there last night, and student after student got up and asked about this, and then I asked them a simple question. They kept talking about occupied Palestine. I said, "What do you mean by occupied Palestine?" And invariably, to a man or woman, each one of them said everything, like from the river all the way to the sea. That's occupied. Well, you can't make peace
Yeah.
on that basis,
Of course, yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
So, as far as whether Israel's been willing to do it, yes, Israel will be willing to do that. But again, that's going to take time and it's going to take credibility. That's what Oslo was supposed to do, and it never even came remotely close to achieving that credibility, largely because Yasser Arafat is one of the worst people who has ever lived and an arch terrorist.
So what would be like sort of your solution to that? What would you propose if you're the one that's mitigating the deal between Israel and Palestine?
I mean, right now, there's no deal to be actually mediated between
Right,
the
just
two
in the
parties.
hypothetical
In the
scenario.
magical hypothetical deal, it would end up
Yeah.
looking like the Palestinian areas that are currently governed by that are currently largely Palestinian would end up under Palestinian control. It would look like land swaps, probably, where the Israeli areas outside the Green Line, like Efrat, which has 30,000 citizens living out there, that was not going to end up in Palestinian control. You're going to have a land swap somewhere else. I mean, that's everybody sort of acknowledges that is the way that it would go. Even Likud, which started off anti-Oslo, once that was the reality on the ground, started to embrace a lot of the language of the two-state solution. So again, I think that the everyone in the West is trying to jump to the solution without recognizing the failure of the premise. If you have two parties who are willing to make a deal is available. And if you only have one party who's willing to make a deal is not available. Right now, only one party is willing to make a deal. The other party has shown itself repeatedly, literally for all of Israeli history, unwilling to make a deal. There's not been a single deal accepted by the Palestinian Arabs or by their predecessors. When I say the predecessors, I mean the Arabs who were in Palestine, didn't consider themselves nationally Palestinian at the time. People who were Syrian, people who were Turkish. The Peel Commission in 1937 recommended a significantly smaller state of Israel. The Jews accepted it. The Arabs rejected it. This has happened over and over and over. 37, 48, happened again in 2000, happened again in 2008, like over and over and over and over. So again, it all comes back to the same point. Once there's a peace partner, you can talk. Until there's a peace partner, there's no talks.
Thank you so much. I feel being destroyed, but thank you.
All right, so I think he's missing one crucial point. The Palestinians and the Arabs understand that Jews are willing to make peace, and that is essentially why that they don't want to make peace. If you understand that someone is willing to concede, always, if they're always going to be, the option is always going to be, you can have a two-state solution. You can go back to the 67 borders. You can do this. You can do that, right? If that option is always available, why should I take it? Let me try to fight until I get more land. And then, I'll be in a better position. Meaning, we're looking at this completely the wrong way. The second that Israel says, no two-state solution, no nothing, screw you, right? The Arabs and Muslims will be like, okay, now they're speaking our language. Now we have to get our shit together, or otherwise we're going to lose our entire land. And that's the biggest problem with the Israel-Palestine conflict. Not necessarily that the Arabs and the Muslims are not looking for peace. It's that the Jews don't understand that they're truly not looking for peace, and don't say, okay, you're not looking for peace, we're not looking for peace, sorry, you're not going to get any state. Once that happens, once there's a shift to Jewish the right wing to basically saying, never Palestine, basically, then the Arabs might come to the table and understand, okay, now we can't fight Israel anymore, okay, now we're gonna have to sort of settle for this territory or that territory. But until that happens, there's going to be no peace.